Imagine, you are a 26-year-old Jewish immigrant. You have no money, no English, no connections, and no plan beyond the vague hope that America is better than what you left behind. You grew up in a tiny Bavarian village where your people were taxed for the crime of existing, where your father died of tuberculosis when you were barely 17, where the law told you which professions you could pursue and which streets you could walk down. You arrived in New York City in the winter of 1847, crammed in steerage, a word that sounds almost dignified but means something far more brutal. Weeks below deck, no fresh air, almost no food, no toilets, no privacy, surrounded by hundreds of other desperate people making the same terrifying bet on a country they had never seen. And yet, that same young man would go on to create the most recognizable piece of clothing in the history of the world. He would build a company that still exists today, over 170 years later, selling $6 billion worth of product every single year in 110 countries, on every continent. He would dress miners and cowboys and soldiers and presidents and rock stars and rebels and teenagers in every corner of the earth. He would put his name on a garment so universal, so deeply woven into the fabric of human culture, that when you try to picture America, blue jeans are practically the first image that appears. His name was Levi Strauss, and the story of how a poor Bavarian boy with nothing but a will of iron became the man who clothed an entire civilization is, I think, one of the most incredible stories in American history. So how did he do it? How does a penniless immigrant from a village most people can't find on a map build a global empire from scratch? To find out, we have to go all the way back to 1829, back to a small house in a small village in the heart of Bavaria, where it all began. Buttenheim. You have probably never heard of it. In 1829, it was a modest market town tucked into the Franconia region of the Kingdom of Bavaria, a stop on the old trade road between Bamberg and Forchheim. It was the kind of place where everyone knew everyone, where the rhythms of life had not changed in centuries, and where, if you happened to be Jewish, the rhythm of your life was dictated not just by the seasons, but by a thick stack of laws designed specifically to make your existence as difficult as possible. Levi Strauss, born Loeb Strauss, came into the world on February 26, 1829, the youngest of 7 children. His father, Hirsch Strauss, was a dry goods peddler, not a wealthy merchant, a peddler, the kind of man who carried goods on his back from village to village, town to town, because the law restricted Jewish people from owning most kinds of businesses, from purchasing property in most areas, from living wherever they chose. The 1813 edict concerning the Jews had formalized much of this discrimination, and the Hungry 40s, the mass food shortages of the 1840s that devastated rural Bavaria, made everything worse. I want you to really sit with what this childhood looked like. You grow up in a house where money is always tight. Your father is a good man, a hard worker, but the system is rigged against him at every turn. You are Jewish in a Catholic country, and that fact alone determines almost everything about the ceiling above you. The professions you can enter, the land you can own, the taxes you must pay simply because of who you are. You watch your father carry goods on his back, and you understand early on that hard work is not enough, that in this place, in this time, your faith is a wall you cannot climb. There were special taxes levied on Jewish families just for practicing their religion. There were restrictions on where you could live, on which professions you could enter, on who you could hire and who could hire you. Anti-Jewish riots had broken out in towns across the German states. The memory of that violence sat in the background of daily life, like a storm that never quite cleared. You were not a citizen in any meaningful sense. You were a resident, tolerated under specific conditions, subject to revocation at any moment if the political winds shifted. And then, in the summer of 1846, when Levi was just 17 years old, his father died. Tuberculosis. Hirsch Strauss was gone, and with him, any remaining sense of stability the family had clung to. His mother, Rebecca, surveyed the wreckage and made the decision that would change everything. Her older sons, Jonas and Louis, had already made it to America. They had built a wholesale dry goods business in New York City, J. Strauss Brother and Co., operating out of 108 Liberty Street in Manhattan. America, Rebecca decided, was where the family's future lived. She would take the younger children and go. She would take Levi. And so, in 1847, the 18-year-old Levi Strauss boarded a ship with his mother and two sisters and left Bavaria forever. He would never go back. The crossing took 6 weeks. 6 weeks in steerage class, below deck, with no natural light, minimal food, almost no clean water, and hundreds of other passengers packed in around them. 6 weeks suspended between one world and another, between everything he had ever known and a country he could not yet imagine. The ship carried people from across Europe, Germans and Irish and Eastern Europeans, all of them running from something, all of them hoping for something else. Levi was one of millions of immigrants who made this crossing in this era, and yet he would be the one whose name you still know 170 years later. When the ship finally docked in New York, Levi Strauss stepped onto American soil with almost nothing in his pockets, no command of English, and a future that was entirely unwritten. He was an outsider here too. He had been an outsider in Bavaria. He would spend his entire life as some version of an outsider. But here, and this was the crucial difference, being an outsider was not a legal category. Here, it was just a starting point. He went to work immediately. That was not a choice. It was a necessity. His brothers put him to work learning the dry goods trade, and Levi absorbed everything. He had grown up watching his father peddle goods. He understood the basic architecture of buying and selling, but now he was learning it at scale, inside a real business. In a city that was the commercial engine of the most dynamic country on earth. New York in the late 1840s was electric, a city of immigrants, a city of ambition, a city that moved so fast it barely paused to ask where you were from. He learned English. He learned the merchandise. He learned how to read a customer, how to close a deal, how to manage inventory. And all the while, he was building something that you cannot teach and cannot buy, a reputation. People who dealt with Levi Strauss came away with the sense that he was the kind of man you could trust, that he would deliver what he promised, and if he could not deliver it, he would tell you honestly why. That sounds simple. It is not. Trust, real trust, is the rarest commodity in any market. Levi was already accumulating it at 20 years old. By 1849, Levi had enough confidence to strike out on his own. He left New York and headed to Louisville, Kentucky, where he could work as a traveling peddler, selling his brother's goods across the region. The 1850 census records him as Peddler DG, dry goods. If you are picturing this as a glamorous next chapter, recalibrate. This was Levi Strauss in his 20s, carrying a trunk or a pack on his back, walking from town to town, knocking on doors, selling what he could, sleeping where he could, and then doing it all over again tomorrow. He was learning the country one transaction at a time. You might wonder why he did this. Why not stay safe in New York, close to family, inside the known world? And the answer, I think, is that Levi Strauss was already something. He was already the kind of person who understood that safety was not the same thing as success. He just did not yet know what he was building toward. Then came the gold rush. In January 1848, a man named James Marshall picked up a piece of metal at a sawmill on the American River in California. The word spread across the country like fire through dry grass, and by 1849, hundreds of thousands of people were moving west. And Levi Strauss, watching from Louisville, made a calculation that would define his entire life. He was not going to mine for gold. That might seem obvious in hindsight, but think about what it took to arrive at that decision at 23 years old, with a trunk full of dry goods and a head full of ambition. Thousands of men were abandoning everything to dig in the dirt, gambling their futures on a glittering maybe. Levi looked at the situation and saw something different. He saw not the gold itself, but the gold rush. He saw tens of thousands of people flooding into California who would need to eat, who would need tools, who would need clothing, who would need everything. He saw that the people who were going to reliably get rich were not the miners. It was the people selling to the miners. In January 1853, Levi became a United States citizen, and almost immediately he made his move. He booked passage on a steamship heading for California via Panama. It was a grueling journey through the jungles of Central America before boarding another ship on the Pacific coast. Uncomfortable, dangerous, expensive. Levi did it anyway, because he had learned a long time ago that discomfort was just the price of forward motion. In early March 1854, Levi Strauss arrived in San Francisco for the first time. He was 24 years old, now a citizen of the country that had taken him in, standing in a city that was barely a city at all. San Francisco in the early 1850s was a boomtown in the most literal sense. Loud, chaotic, improvised, dangerous, and full of opportunity for anyone willing to work fast enough to catch it. The population had exploded from roughly 1,000 people in 1848 to more than 35,000 by 1852. Tents had given way to wood frame buildings, which were giving way to more substantial structures. But the whole thing still felt precarious, temporary, like a city that was making itself up as it went along. Levi caught it. He opened a West Coast branch of the family business under his own name, Levi Strauss & Company. He imported fine dry goods from his brother's operation in New York: clothing, bedding, combs, purses, handkerchiefs, bolts of cloth, and he sold them wholesale to the dozens of small general stores springing up across California and the Pacific Northwest. He was not selling to individuals. He was selling to the stores that sold to individuals. It was a smarter model, a scalable model, and Levi understood instinctively that volume was the game. Now here is what I want you to appreciate about what Levi was building in these early years. It was not glamorous. There was no single breakthrough, no overnight revelation. It was day after day of relationship building, of reputation management, of showing up and delivering exactly what he promised, at the price he promised, on the schedule he promised. San Francisco was full of merchants. What Levi Strauss understood was that in a chaotic market, the merchant people trusted was the one who would win. And so he made trust his core product. He also made generosity a core value. Within a year of arriving in San Francisco, he made his first donation to the Orphan Asylum Society of the city. This was not a wealthy man making a tax-advantaged gift. This was a young immigrant who had almost nothing himself, giving what he could to people who had even less. It tells you something essential about who Levi Strauss was. He believed that success was not a personal possession, it was something you shared. Throughout the late 1850s and the 1860s, Levi Strauss & Company grew steadily. He was serving small stores up and down the California coast, across Nevada and Oregon, across the vast American West that was being stitched together by wagon trails and then, slowly, by railroad. The company was prosperous, well-regarded and profitable, but it was not yet extraordinary. It was one of several wholesale dry goods operations serving the American West. Levi was doing well. He had not yet done something that would last forever. That was about to change, and it was going to come from the most unexpected direction: a letter. Jacob Davis was a tailor. Born in Latvia in 1831, he had eventually made his way to Reno, Nevada, where he made a modest living altering and constructing garments for the working men of the region. He was one of Levi Strauss & Company's customers, purchasing bolts of denim and canvas from the wholesale house on a regular basis. He was good at his trade, reliable and inventive, the kind of craftsman who was always looking for a way to do things better. In 1871, a woman came into Jacob's shop with a problem. Her husband was a large man, a laborer, and he kept destroying his pants. The seams blew out, the pockets tore, the fabric gave way under the demands of real physical work. She needed something that would last. Jacob Davis took her money and started thinking. And what he came up with was so simple, it almost defies belief. Metal rivets, small copper rivets, placed at the points of maximum stress, the pocket corners, the base of the button fly, to hold the fabric together where it was most likely to fail. The pants he made for that woman were indestructible. Word spread, as it always does in a small community of working people. Other laborers came to Jacob wanting the same thing. He made more, he sold more, he refined the design, and by 1872, he had a problem of a different kind. He had a product people were desperate for, and he knew that the moment word got out, every tailor in Nevada would copy it. He needed a patent. But patents cost money. The filing fee alone, around $68, was more than Jacob Davis could spare. So he sat down and wrote a letter to his fabric supplier, a San Francisco businessman he had been dealing with for years and who he trusted. He wrote to Levi Strauss. In the letter, he explained what he had invented, how it worked, and what he believed it could become. And then he asked if Levi would be willing to put up the money to file the patent in both their names. Let me put you in that room for a moment. Levi Strauss is reading this letter in his San Francisco office. He is in his early 40s, a successful businessman with a reputation to protect. The man writing to him is a tailor in Reno, asking him to co-invest in a pair of pants. $68 was not nothing. More than that, attaching his name to a patent was a public act. If the pants failed, if the idea went nowhere, everyone would know. There was real risk here, real exposure. But Levi Strauss read that letter, and something clicked. Because what Jacob Davis was describing was not just a new pair of pants. It was a solution to a problem that literally every working man in America had. The clothes simply were not strong enough for the work. Every miner, every rancher, every railroad worker, every farmer, all of them were destroying their clothing because the clothing was not built for what they were doing. Riveted pants that could survive actual labor. That was not a niche product. That was a mass market waiting to be unlocked. He wrote back, "Yes." Levi agreed to fund the patent and enter into a formal business partnership with Jacob Davis to manufacture and sell the riveted work pants at scale. It was one of the most consequential yeses in American business history. He brought Jacob Davis from Reno to San Francisco to oversee production. They set up manufacturing operations, hired workers, and built the supply chain that would turn bolts of sturdy denim into pants that could survive a mining shift or a cattle drive. On May 20th, 1873, the United States Patent Office issued patent number 139,121 to Jacob W. Davis and Levi Strauss and Company for an improvement in fastening pocket openings. The patent protected their copper rivet innovation and gave them the sole right to manufacture and sell riveted trousers for 17 years. The pants were initially called waist overalls. The word jeans would come much later, but the design was unmistakable. 2 legs, sturdy denim, copper rivets at every point of stress. Stitched into the back, a leather patch bearing the name Levi Strauss and Company. They began manufacturing immediately, and the response was staggering. Miners bought them by the hundreds. Ranchers bought them. Cowboys bought them. Railroad workers bought them. Farmers bought them. These were people whose livelihoods depended on clothing that could take punishment. And here was clothing that could actually do it. Word spread across California, across Nevada, across the entire American West. The pants were extraordinary. They lasted. They held together. They were worth every penny. Within the first year of manufacturing, Levi Strauss was doing something no one in the dry goods business had quite done before. He was building a brand, not just a product, but an identity. These were not just work pants, these were Levi's pants. The name was inseparable from the quality, and when imitators appeared, which they did almost immediately because the market was too good to resist, Levi Strauss did not sit back and accept it. He sued them. In the company's very first year of denim manufacturing, Levi Strauss and Company took 2 rivals to court for selling knockoff riveted designs. He was protecting something, and he knew it. The business grew with a speed that would be remarkable in any era, but was almost unimaginable in the 1870s. Levi moved the operation into a large manufacturing facility in San Francisco, employing hundreds of workers, many of them women, some of them recent immigrants, not unlike the young man he himself had once been. He oversaw everything: quality control, pricing, distribution, customer relationships. He was known in San Francisco as a man of absolute integrity. His word was his contract. His handshake was his bond. People did business with Levi Strauss not just because his products were good, but because they trusted him completely. The way to do a great deal, he once said, is to keep on doing a little. Not the most dramatic philosophy, is it? But sit with it. Keep on doing a little. Show up every day. Build the relationship. Deliver what you promise. Earn the trust. And then tomorrow, do it again. That quiet relentlessness was the engine behind everything Levi built. It is also the philosophy that separates the businesses that last from the ones that merely flash and disappear. By 1877, just 4 years after the patent was granted, Levi Strauss was worth more than $4 million. Let me put that in context for you. $4 million in 1877 is the rough equivalent of more than $100 million today. The boy who arrived in America with nothing in steerage class, who spent years peddling goods on his back through Kentucky, that boy was now one of the wealthiest men in California. He had done it the hard way, the only way really. One customer at a time, one transaction at a time, one trusted relationship at a time. And through all of it, through every year of rising success, Levi never stopped giving. He gave to Jewish charitable organizations, the Eureka Benevolent Society, the Hebrew Board of Relief, the Pacific Hebrew Orphan Asylum. He gave to non-Jewish institutions too, because he believed that his obligation to his community was not bounded by religion. He gave to hospitals, to schools, to orphanages. In 1897, just 5 years before his death, he established 28 scholarships at the University of California, Berkeley. 28. And here is the detail that stops me every time I encounter it. Half of those scholarships were explicitly for women. In 1897, at a time when the idea of a woman attending university was still deeply controversial, Levi Strauss was funding their education because he believed it was right. When the 17-year patent expired in 1890, the playing field opened up. Any manufacturer could now make riveted pants. Competitors flooded the market. And yet, Levi Strauss & Company not only survived, but continued to grow. Because by then, they had something competitors could not simply copy: the name, the reputation, the trust that had been built over nearly 2 decades. Levi had understood instinctively that the patent was temporary, but the brand, if you built it right, was forever. He died on September 26, 1902, at the age of 73. He had never married, never had children. His estate amounted to nearly $6 million, the bulk of which he left to his 4 nephews, Jacob, Louis, Abraham, and Sigmund Stern, who would carry the company forward. He made charitable bequests to organizations across San Francisco, the city that had taken in a young Bavarian immigrant half a century earlier and given him everything. The obituaries were full of admiration, written by people who had known him personally, who had done business with him, who had seen up close what kind of man he was. He was described as a man of simple habits and quiet generosity, a man who did not need the city to celebrate him because he was too busy serving it. But I think the truest eulogy was written not in any newspaper, but in the pants themselves, in every rivet, in every stitch, in a product so right, so perfectly designed for human need, that no one has ever fully improved upon it. And the company kept going. When the devastating San Francisco earthquake and fire of 1906, striking 4 years after Levi's death, consumed much of the city, it destroyed the factory and warehouse. Everything physical burned, but the brand survived because the brand was not a building. It was a relationship built over half a century. The company rebuilt almost immediately because the pants were too important to the people who wore them. You can burn a warehouse. You cannot burn an idea whose time has come. By the 1920s, the waist overalls were the best-selling men's work pants in the United States. In the 1930s, Eastern tourists visiting dude ranches out west came home with Levi's, introducing the East Coast to something it had never quite seen: workwear as fashion. The 501, the product number assigned to the original riveted design, began its slow migration from the mines and ranches into the broader culture. Then came the 1950s, and everything shifted. Marlon Brando put on a pair of blue jeans in The Wild One. James Dean wore them in Rebel Without a Cause. Suddenly, the most practical item of clothing in America was also the most subversive, the most dangerous, the most desirable. Jeans became the uniform of youth rebellion, of cool, of a very specific American attitude toward authority. Schools banned them, parents disapproved, which naturally made every teenager on Earth want to wear them immediately. By the 1960s and 1970s, the counterculture had claimed Levi's completely. Civil rights marchers wore them, musicians wore them, artists wore them. The pants that had started in the mines had become the costume of every generation that refused to be told what to wear. In 1964, a pair of the original Levi's riveted work pants entered the permanent collection of the Smithsonian Institution in Washington, D.C. Think about that. A pair of work pants in a museum dedicated to the artifacts of American civilization, because that is exactly what they are. Today, Levi Strauss & Company generates roughly $6 billion in annual revenue. The 501 jean is still in production. The same essential design, the same copper rivets, the same silhouette, making it the longest continuously produced garment in history. The brand operates in more than 110 countries. You can find Levi's in Tokyo and Lagos and Buenos Aires and Mumbai and Oslo. You can find them in the closets of billionaires and in the closets of teenagers saving up for their first pair. The 501 is the rare object that transcends class, transcends culture, transcends era. And at the center of it all, at the origin point of this staggering global story, is a 17-year-old boy standing at a graveside in Buttenheim, Bavaria, watching his father being lowered into the ground, not knowing yet that in less than a decade he would board a ship that would carry him across an ocean to a country where none of the old rules applied, where a Jewish peddler's son could become anything, where the only ceiling was the one you accepted. Levi Strauss did not accept it. That is the lesson, and I think it is an incredible one. Not just the story of a great product or a great company, though it is absolutely both of those things. The lesson is about what happens when someone from nowhere refuses to believe that nowhere is where they belong. Levi Strauss arrived in America as an outsider, and he remained, in some ways, an outsider his entire life. A Jewish bachelor in a city that was not always welcoming, building a business in an industry full of people who wanted to see him fail. And yet, he outlasted them. He outbuilt them. He outgave them. He outtrusted them. He did not do it through brilliance alone, though he was brilliant. He did not do it through luck, though he caught a few good breaks. He did it the way he always said, by doing a little every single day, until the little added up to something enormous, until the something enormous became a company, until the company became a brand, until the brand became a symbol, until the symbol became, quite simply, the most recognizable piece of clothing on earth. A poor Bavarian boy, an immigrant with empty pockets and a full heart. A man who understood that the way to build something lasting was not to chase the gold rush, but to clothe the people chasing it. That is Levi Strauss. That is the story of the blue jean. And honestly, I don't think we've ever made anything more American.